Hey everyone, we are Kairos Coffee Chats. Thank you so much for tuning in today.
Today's episode will be one of our many Teaology talks, where we specifically address tough questions regarding Christianity.
We are very aware of all the tea that comes with theology, so this is our space to spill it all.
So buckle up and let's dive in.
What's up, guys? My name is Ryan,
I'm Jared.
and we are Kairos Coffee Chats.
This podcast exists as a safe space for you to bring your questions and rethink faith so you can encounter Jesus personally.
We are currently doing this podcast in a virtual coffee shop, as you can tell. So you'll see us mess around with this beautiful AI room.
This is a cool feature. I didn't even know we were planning this thing a few minutes ago, and then I just see Ryan messing around on a laptop, and the whole screen changes. I'm like,
Literally perfect. This
so
could be
good.
like a better buzz, like background.
This looks like one of those small, like hole in the wall eclectic coffee shops you see. It's like
Eclectic.
legit though. It's just like that minimalist design, the floating shelves, like.
And Zoom has come a long way since COVID, man. But we are excited for everyone who is listening in right now. Thank you guys for being here. We are currently thousands of miles apart. Jared is playing tournaments in Japan, and my wife and I will actually be in Japan also in a few days.
I'm waiting for this fool to show up, man. It's been like, it's fun, obviously, get to play tennis in Japan. But me and Ryan, we have talked about being in Japan
For the longest time.
for so long, and it just happened that these tournaments are going on, and he and his wife are coming for their delayed honeymoon at the same time. Like, this is
Gotta
God.
make it work. Gotta make
God.
it work now.
We gotta do something, man. So hopefully we get to meet up for a couple days. They'll be in Tokyo when they land, recuperating, and I gotta get back there after this week.
Thank you guys again for joining us today. Today is actually the first time we're doing a two-part podcast series. So this is part one of talking about Jesus specifically. We'll be talking about, did Jesus really exist in this podcast? And did he really resurrect from the dead? And then the next podcast, we're going to talk more about him as a teacher and the things that he did that we read in the Bible. Are those things consistent with who he is? Like, who does he say that he is in the Bible? So we've talked about Christianity at a macro level. We've talked about Christians, talked about God himself. And now we're going to talk about his son, Jesus. And we figured we got to do a two-parter on this to really cover our bases.
Yeah,
And yeah, so
a good solid introduction at the very.
yeah, so today we're going to be doing a more historical look at Jesus, how he has impacted the world, and why we believe he actually did exist. That's what we're talking about today.
Yeah, absolutely, man. But before we get into that, we got our breaker.
As always. What you got?
Ryan, you get one wish from a genie. What are you wishing for?
Ooh.
I don't really. For me, I'm not gonna
go for it.
It's easy to, the money thing, or like money's like an easy one because you can get so much other stuff with that.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
A little outside the box, more so than just being an athlete, but just wanting to be healthy. I would wish that I would never get an injury ever from anything. Like, I could just be healthy, fully able-bodied till the day I die. Like, I can run with my kids 50, like I can do all that stuff, continue to play tennis, obviously, which is like injury prevention for life. Yo, I'd take that all day. That sounds so good to me.
Fair enough. I think that's a blessing to be healthy just in general. No, for sure. I feel that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Injuries suck. Health problems. I know, like, that's a big issue. Just being healthy, being able to do the things you want to do. That's it's an underrated blessing to be healthy, to be able to do the things you want to do and just enjoy life.
I was really aware of it. Me and my brother went up a few years ago. My grandpa's health was like declining, and he needed like in-home caregivers. And I was actually playing some tournaments up near my hometown of Sacramento. So we were taking care of him for like 2 to 3 weeks, and like fully taking care of him.
Mm.
Like I helped him shave, I helped him go to the bathroom, I helped him change, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And two things. One, just being thankful for a body that works, and I want to maintain that for as long as I can.
Yeah.
Like it just made me so thankful. And also, people who want to work with the elderly, they are a special breed. Like they are
I
straight.
agree.
Man. Like it takes people who actively want to go into that field after having been in it for just a small portion of time. God bless them. Like from the bottom of my heart, bless them.
Totally. That definitely takes a special kind of person.
Yeah, you have to actually like, you have to love it, man. You have to love it, I feel like.
Yeah. For sure. For sure. That's a good answer, man.
Yeah. All right. What about you? What's your wish?
And I can't ask for more wishes. That's the rule.
That's always the
Yeah. I assume that's the case. That's cheating.
got one wish.
Well, okay. If you're gonna go for no injuries the rest of your life or just good health the rest of your life, I would go eating anything I want without any repercussions.
Okay. Yeah,
I
that's
can eat
fair.
anything without gaining weight, without getting health problems essentially. I can just eat whatever I want and yeah, never have any repercussions. I hope to
My boy
have that in heaven.
throwing self-control out the window.
That way I can, yeah, I won't have to feel bad about overeating, about anything, you know? Chick-fil-A
Okay.
all the time I want, you know?
Because I've known you for a while.
Yeah,
I don't see you overeat or indulge in crap like often. So I feel like you're just being hard on yourself.
perhaps. I don't
Like
know,
you're just
because I'd want to be able to eat more too and enjoy other foods. Of course, I'm trying to discover and be used to eating new foods.
yeah.
I also want to not feel bad if I have Chicago pizza 7 times a week if I'm in Chicago and I want to try all these different chains, you know what I mean? I don't want to be able to like feel bad about that, you know?
Okay, that's
I'm
fair.
like, depending on where I am, trying all the food there, I don't want to have the repercussions that come with all that, depending on where I am. Now, granted, certain places in the world are probably healthier to eat their food than other places. Like probably portion sizes in Japan, way better. Food is probably way fresher there
Food's
compared to here.
yeah. The portion sizes aren't bad. Like
Mm,
I mean, get extra noodles with my ramen.
of course.
But like, of course, me too. But like, yeah, they're like they're especially for an athlete, they're better portion sizes than like Europe.
Okay.
Europe was like,
Hmm.
dude, I just hungry all the time.
Interesting.
They're small, dude. Like a lot of things are smaller. Here, it's just like the living quarters are
Ah,
small.
fair enough.
Yeah, we were talking earlier. I was like, there's probably a total. I've been here over a week, and there's probably been a total of 3 doorways I haven't had to duck under. I'm 6'4". This
And you're
country.
towering over all these Japanese people.
Oh, dude, going on the subways because like everyone takes public transit here. Like I'm just in this sea of people up to my like peck.
Oh gosh.
I stand out so much.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah,
Alrighty. Well, good question. That's a good question to ruminate on.
I like the answer. Like the answers. All right, now let's get to these real questions. The
Mm-hmm.
the man himself.
Mm-hmm.
After however many episodes, we're finally getting to him. Jesus, the God man, the man we place all of our faith and all of our hopes in.
Mm-hmm.
Was he real? Was he a real guy? Like what? This sounds like too good to be true. Got a little skepticism in there. It's too easy for God to just come down and be everything we couldn't. So how do we know this was real? How do we know this wasn't just a ploy or a power tactic or just a nice story to read to children?
Mm. Yeah, I imagine like because both of us grew up in Christian homes,
Mhm.
and we knew Jesus as like a normal part of our weekly Sunday routine. But for those who haven't grown up with a Christian background, you probably hear all these stories and about Jesus performing all these miracles, and it almost sounds like a fairy tale. It doesn't make
Oh,
total sense, you know?
oh,
Yeah.
it just
So
sounds
like,
fantastic, dudes. Healing sick people, walking on water. It just sounds like straight out of a fairy book.
yeah, water to wine. Yeah. I mean, like,
Like what? Like
there's
who
so
does?
many things that he does that seem to not make sense, and I think it's definitely very easy and almost logical to put him on the same level as Santa Claus or Peter Pan or like just any other fantastical story, just because things don't seem logical and they're nice to think about. They're pretty miraculous stories, and I think as a
Mhm.
kid, regardless of whether you grow up in a Christian household or not, there's this. We all have that innate childlike awe when we think about things like out of this world.
Mhm. Yeah, we
And
love it.
we like think about those.
We want it to be real.
Hmm.
We Santa Claus. Like yes, we want that. We want that to be real. We want
Tooth
uh,
Fairy.
Tooth Fairy. Yo, money for losing parts of me. I'm gonna lose anyway. Take that. Like it's amazing. We have that, as the Bible calls that, childlike faith. Like we're just open to it, and it sounds so amazing. And it's when we get older, and I don't know, it's kind of a more pessimistic view, but it's just like
Hmm.
when life goes over the head and we get brought to reality. I feel like that's when these questions can kind of come, where it's like, wait a minute, okay, this is cool as a child when I heard about it, but like some of these grown adults actually believe this. Like this, is
Hmm.
this true? Was Jesus really around?
Hmm. You also start seeing problems in the world. You start seeing brokenness,
Mhm.
evil,
Like
war,
what
torture,
we talked
suffering.
in the previous episode, Theology Talk, we talked about just like, is God even present with all the state of the world? Is he just the hands off kind of thing?
Hmm.
So before we get into this, we want to preface by saying we are not history experts. We like reading about it. We like informing ourselves and bolstering our faith with historical evidence and things of that nature, because it goes hand in hand, both what we put our faith in and evidence for that faith,
Mm.
not just blind.
We're not scholars.
Yes, exactly.
We
So
are we
these
are
are
common folk.
we these are things that we've found to have complement our faith as we read the Bible and make sense of the world around us.
We'll also draw too, not just from the Bible when it comes to this more historical discussion of Jesus. We'll also draw from like what has actually happened in history as we see it today, like the history of the church as we see it today.
Absolutely.
That's where we're drawing from like a more cause and effect kind of logic and reasoning.
Exactly. And when we talk about cause and effect, getting to the question of was Jesus real, it's hard to see anyone who's had more effect
Mm,
on the world than the person of Jesus. Like let's just step back for a second. Like nursery rhymes are great. There's some that have transcended the globe. Everyone knows, Hansel and Gretel, freaking
mm,
Jack and the Beanstalk. Okay, yeah, those are all great. No fairy tale has really revolutionized the world, good or bad. I
mm,
want to say Jesus talks about you're gonna have there's this scene in one of the gospels where Jesus he confronts a mixed group of people. There's his followers, there's unaffiliated Jews and townsfolk, and then there's Pharisees. Everyone has a distinct reaction to what Jesus says. So whether it be the Pharisees who just vehemently, end up persecuting and killing him, his followers who get persecuted and killed for believing in him, or the people who just walk away with their paradigm being shifted, it's like being challenged.
mm,
Jesus, the person of Jesus Christ causes some kind of shift and some kind of ripple effect. It's never just, oh yeah, Jesus, and you like turn. throughout every civilization, wherever Christianity has touched, again, good or bad, because yes, the church itself, not so much Jesus, but the church itself, people call themselves Christians, have used it for bad. It causes some kind of change. And there's no other historical figure that does that, like Jesus. So at the very least, it makes you think like, okay, there's this one common denominator. No matter how many years, how many centuries, how many decades have passed, Jesus is still hanging around, like
Mm.
more around. He is influencing culture.
The Bible is still the most printed book in the world today, to
That's
date.
the all-time bestseller, most
Literally.
most translated too, right?
Hmm.
Into languages. And I mean, when you think about, just touching on like some of the stuff that Jesus taught, and this we'll get into more later. The bedrock of Western civilization, so North American civilization and some places in Europe, their teachings are based on Christianity and what Jesus taught. The reason it's not ethical or morally right to be underhanded doing business, even if you can get away with it, is because of what Jesus taught and being truthful. You can tie it back to so many things. A lot of places have just lost the religion aspect,
Hmm.
but the religion is still influencing how the entire society as a whole is carried out to the day.
The morals, the ethics.
Yeah, 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 exactly. So throughout time, he's continued to impact, to have his fingerprint on society.
Hmm. And what's interesting too is that you mentioned Western civilization and nations, like here in America, places in Europe, and it's not just the West either. Christianity has had an effect in not just Europe, because maybe when we think about the history of Christianity, we think about the Roman Catholic Church, how it started from there, how it started from Emperor Constantine, making Christianity the official religion. We've mentioned
Hmm.
his name before.
That was the start. Hmm.
Hmm. We can draw our understanding of Jesus from Constantine's actions and how he used Christianity in a militaristic, colonialist, imperialist way.
To push a political agenda in a good
Hmm.
sense. Like, not saying he didn't do good things, like he stopped the persecution of millions of Christians.
Hmm.
That'll always be good. Lives saved.
Good. Very, very good.
Just like we see with actual biblical characters, there's even the best men are still men at best.
So when we even look at just Rome, before we even get into how Christianity has affected other nations across the other continents, Africa and Asia, Middle East, before we even get there, Rome itself, in the first 300 years after Jesus rose and ascended to the Father, Christianity was basically illegal in the Roman Empire.
Oh
And we
yeah.
have the Roman Empire and the Persian empires as like the two biggest empires in that region. And starting from when Jesus first commissioned his 12 disciples to make disciples of all nations up until Constantine, we start with such a small population of believers. But by the time Constantine comes into power and legalizes Christianity, by then the population of Christians in the Roman Empire is over half,
Hmm.
like millions of Christians in just 300 years.
Funny to me.
Even though there was persecution by like 3 to 4 like terrible emperors, Emperor Nero, Diocletian, Decian, Maximus, there were some bad Roman empires.
They would hold parties where the torches were Christians that were on fire.
Yeah. They
Like,
would have Christians in the Colosseum, mauled by animals, boiled alive, burned on a
and
stake.
and yet during those acts, people watching would convert to Christianity.
Yeah.
That's how it grew. They put this spectacle on to dissuade people from going to the religion, but seeing people who have a hope outside of this life that is so tangible that they're like, okay, I'm gonna die.
Hmm. Yeah. And we'll
It,
get more into like that kind of devotion later on.
mm-hmm. Yes,
Um,
exactly.
because that devotion can definitely be misinterpreted One other thing I want to touch on to kind of give us some historical breadcrumbs to follow when it comes to whether Jesus existed or not is the fact that the Roman Empire technically wasn't the first Christian nation, or rather the first nation state, or just like organized group of people to become Christian.
Yes.
It's interesting. There's this, if you read about this nation state called Edessa, Edessa. The nation state of Edessa lived or existed around the time of Jesus, and it was in the Persian Empire. The Persian Empire at this time, much of the religion was considered Zoroastrian. That was the primary worldview back then.
What is that?
Zoroastrianism has elements of like looking at the stars for divine revelation or guidance. Actually, the you know the three magi who travel to meet Jesus
Yeah.
and give him gifts of frankincense, myrrh, and gold. They were Zoroastrian priests from the Persian Empire. They traveled all the way to see Jesus because they followed the Star of David.
Ooh.
So the Star of David would have meant something to them because they're following the signs.
Mhm.
So
Interesting. I
if you
didn't
think
know
about
that
it, they are the first Christians to believe in Jesus when he was first born,
Yeah.
and they weren't Jews. He was still an infant.
Ooh.
Isn't that
They were
crazy?
Jews.
Yeah. So we can imagine that these Zoroastrian magi from the Persian Empire traveled back to their hometown because that's what we read in the Gospels, that they traveled back another way so that they would not get killed
Avoid.
by King Herod, right?
Yeah.
So we can imagine that they went back to the Persian Empire, and word of Jesus probably spread in the next 30 or so years to this nation state of Edessa. Around the time of Jesus, there's this document, this historical document of this letter by a king named King Abgar. During the time of Jesus's last week on earth, Holy Week, he's sick and he has heard about Jesus. So he writes a letter and has his correspondents travel to Jerusalem to deliver this letter to Jesus. And he basically asks him to come over to Edessa to heal him because he believes in him. He's heard about everything that he's done, all the miracles, all his teachings. Word has made way from Israel and that area near the Jordan, the Mediterranean, has made all the way inland to the Persian Empire, to Edessa. So he just asked Jesus to come and heal him because he believes in him. Jesus purportedly in this letter writes back to him, and the correspondents bring this letter back to King Abgar, basically saying, "Blessed are you, even though you have not seen me, you have believed in me. I will I will send you one of my disciples because I have to go back to my father now. So when I come back, I'm going to send one of my disciples out to you guys." And the tradition goes is that Thaddeus, one of the 12, goes over to Edessa, and he's renamed. I forget what he's renamed, but it's in the Syriac language, which was the Persian language back then.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, his name was Adai. He was renamed Adai, and it's still in this letter. Adai, aka Thaddeus, one of the 12, preaches a sermon, and when you look at the sermon, it sounds and looks, and it is structured very similar to Paul's or Peter's sermons in Acts and in the New Testament. It looks very similar, and the theology and the points he's making about Jesus, that it is only through Jesus that one can be saved. His whole argument in these sermons, it's like identical to Peter and Paul and James, all the New Testament writers. It's incredible. Now, this
Right.
in the Christian community, in the scholarly community, some people claim that this letter seems to be more legendary than actual fact, but there is proof, like archaeological evidence, of churches in Edessa, in this region of Edessa.
Regardless, Christianity is there.
Exactly. There is a history of Christianity in that nation before even Rome became a Christian nation in the 300s.
Mm-hmm.
So that is one of those breadcrumbs that has historical relevance, that Jesus had an impact not even in his own area, not just in the West, but in the East too.
It couldn't be contained.
Mm-hmm.
Going, like he says in Matthew, they're going to the ends of the earth,
Yeah.
as far and as wide as possible, because that's Jesus' mission. That's why he was here. It's for everybody. And as you just said, the Magi were some of the first people,
Exactly.
non-Jews, to believe in Christ as the Messiah.
There's more I could say about this, but the disciples went to different parts of the world after this, and we have different traditions where you have churches in Africa, in India, Asia, Middle East. It's crazy. So Jesus and his teachings and the word of him, I would say, had such a deeper and more profound impact than any fairy tale like Santa Claus has had.
Oh yes. So it was so funny the way I found out Santa wasn't real. It was just one Christmas. My parents just didn't keep up the lie, and like none of the gifts were from Santa. Nobody said anything. I just looked around. I was like, oh, all right.
All right. That's when it starts. That's when it goes all downhill from there, you know?
But yeah,
Everything's a lie at that point.
but yeah, I mean, talking about the impact Santa has, just now it's all the way back into September when you start seeing Christmas decorations in stores and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's just
Already.
a little part of the year where you're talking about humanity as a whole, what we value as good and evil shifted because of the event,
Mm-hmm.
because of it. And the reason part of is so impactful is what he did, what he claimed to have done, which was rise from the dead. But did he really?
Did he really rise from the dead?
That's one of the because that's at the end of the day, that is what as we as Christians base our faith on.
Mm-hmm.
That's the cornerstone. If that didn't happen, Paul writes, we are to be the most pitied because our hope is in vain. Like we have nothing without that. Even if we still have the miracles, if we still have all the other stuff that happened, it doesn't matter. That means there's no life after this one.
What's the point?
What's the point?
Christianity.
Did Jesus rise from the dead?
Mm-hmm. Christianity is dead without the resurrection.
Exactly.
We have no foundation on which we place our faith. There is no reason for this podcast if we didn't believe the resurrection was true, and why we're telling you about it, that it can have an impact on your life. If we didn't believe that the resurrection is true.
Yeah. There's a very good book that got turned into a movie called The Case for Christ. Really good. And it's a true story about this reporter whose wife converts to Christianity, and she's very into it, and the husband's just a skeptic, and he's like, he has to write, it's been a couple of years since I watched it. He has to write this article, and he writes it about Christianity, and he goes at it in a sense, he like goes for the jugular, he goes for the throat, where he's like, did this resurrection really happen? So he goes to these different people, he goes to priests, he goes to doctors, and he comes back with, like, at the end of the movie, he gives his life to Christ. He finds this evidence that it looks likely, like it does. And then so when we see in the Bible about Jesus' resurrection, so we have 4 accounts of Jesus' resurrection. We have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, 4 gospels. And in that there's some telling evidence as to the validity and the truthfulness behind what they're claiming, that Jesus rose from the dead. And one of them is in Mark, the book of Mark, in chapter 16, about when 2 of his female followers go to visit the tomb on the 3rd day.
I'll read from it right here. I actually think it says 3. There's 3 here. 3 women. That's cool.
His female followers.
Yeah. Alrighty, I'm going to start from verse 1. Now, granted, this is on the third day of Jesus being in the tomb. And so we have these three women who want to honor Jesus by bringing spices to them. So this is where we pick it up in verse 1. When the Sabbath was past, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome bought spices so that they might go and anoint him. And very early on the first day of the week, Sunday, we assume, when the sun had risen, they went to the tomb. And they were saying to one another, "Who will roll away the stone for us from the entrance of the tomb?" Because back then they like rolled huge circular stones in front of tombs, as their custom.
I was their
And look,
burial.
mhm. And looking up, they saw that the stone had been rolled back. It was very large. And entering the tomb, they saw a young man sitting at the right side, dressed in a white robe, and they were alarmed. I would be too, probably. It's kind of weird. And he said to them, "Do not be alarmed. You seek Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He has risen. He is not here. See the place where they laid him. But go and tell his disciples and Peter that he is going before you to Galilee. There you will see him, just as he told you." And they went out and fled from the tomb, for trembling and astonishment had seized them, and they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. Now when he rose early uh, on the first day of the week, Jesus, he appeared to Mary Magdalene, from whom he had cast out 7 demons. She went and told those who had been with him, as they mourned and wept. But when they had heard that he was alive and had been seen by her, they wouldn't believe it. So the thing is, with when it comes to women in ancient days, they had like no say, right? They had very little status, reputation. They were illiterate, typically. They were just at the home, taking care of the family, cooking meals.
The roles were very defined,
They were
and
property, also.
they
Yeah.
were seen more akin to something than
Hmm.
someone. Or
Yeah.
yeah, their weight, what they said, did not hold the same weight as what a man said.
So here in this gospel, we see that Jesus appeared to women to tell the boys, the 12 disciples. Well, I guess 11. Judas isn't there anymore. But the women are the messengers now, telling this news about Jesus. To me, that seems pretty indicative of how this account of Jesus seems more reliable, because women wouldn't have been trusted for this kind of news.
This is the most important news in history. Why would you give it to the gender that is lower status in this context,
In this culture.
unless that's what really happened?
Hmm. And there's more to be said about what Jesus did for women. So many women followed him. And
Hmm.
like these three women, they were crucial parts of his ministry. Like they were the ones financing the ministry with their own business behind the scenes. Even though we read about the 12 disciples traveling with Jesus and they were all men, these
Hmm.
women are recorded as financing his ministry. They were the business people.
Yes.
So here you have Jesus elevating these women and giving them new status and new purpose, not having to be related or simply by being married or being someone or being a man's property.
They were given an identity in Christ
Hmm.
and thus a purpose.
Hmm. So that's our first clue or
Mhm.
breadcrumb that Jesus actually did rise from the dead.
Another one we see is later in the New Testament in Paul's letter, first letter to the Corinthians, or second letter, however you want to look at it, but that's a different topic. He's talking about the gospel. He's wrapping up this letter. We're in chapter 15. I'm talking about the letter, about the hope we have in putting our faith in Christ, how we ought to live, conduct ourselves in light of this hope. And in chapter 15, verse 1, he says, "Now, brothers and sisters, I want to remind you of the gospel I preached to you, which you received, and on which you have taken your stand. By this gospel you are saved, and if you hold firmly to the word I preach to you. Otherwise, you have believed in vain. It goes back to what we were talking about. If this isn't true, or it's all for naught. Paul continues to write, for what I received, I passed on to you as of first importance, that Christ died for our sins according to scriptures, that he was buried, that he was raised on the third day according to the scriptures, and that he appeared to Cephas, who is Peter, and then to the 12 disciples. After that, he appeared to more than 500 of the brothers and sisters at the same time, most of whom are still living, though some have fallen asleep or passed away by the time that Paul's writing this letter. Then he appeared to James, then to the apostles, and last of all, he appeared also to me as one abnormally born. So Paul, he's illustrating, he's listing, he's name dropping. He is saying Jesus appeared to these people, most of whom are living at the time of you reading this letter. Go ask them. He's telling you, he's referencing Jesus's last 40 days on earth, when after he rose, after that Mark passage that Ryan just read, he continues for 40 more days on this earth with his disciples before being taken up into heaven. And during that time, he appears to more and more people, one of which he appears to 500 at a time. So it's not like just his inner circle saw them. Regular people saw him. He's giving you, like, we have this hope. This is true. Like, this is important. The women saw the tomb. They went and told the disciples. The disciples went and checked themselves. Jesus appeared to them. Then Jesus appeared to more people. And then he was taken up into heaven. And now those same disciples who ran away in Jesus's hour of need, those same disciples who abandoned the Messiah, are now laying their lives down for the truth that he is risen. And Paul says, I'm one of them too. I've encountered Jesus. He is alive right now, and you can encounter him too.
If you think about it, he didn't have to do that, Jesus. He didn't have to stay for 40 days.
Nope.
He still went around, and like, he could have just resurrected from the dead and then showed maybe a few people and then got back up. But he stayed around for 40 days with the holes from the nails in his wrists and in his feet.
He had the same battered body, but new life, new spirit in him.
There was even an instance where Thomas, he's called Doubting Thomas, he sees Jesus in person and he still doubts. He's like, Lord, have you really risen from the dead? And Jesus literally tells him, look at my holes, like, put your hands in these holes of mine.
Touch my hands, feel my side.
Where he got pierced on the cross. And he does so, and then he believes. So Jesus gave him like the honor of having that physical proof. Yes. It's still him.
And well, you might say, well, why doesn't Jesus just do that now? I'll believe. Like, why doesn't he just come back? I'm gonna pull one of Cliff Nechtel's. I do not know. I don't know. Jesus says a couple times, once if not twice, blessed are those who have not seen and still believe.
Just like King Abgar.
Just like King Abgar. Just like so many characters we see, so many people, historical figures, who did not actually get to see Jesus, but saw what he did in the world, how he just literally time split when Jesus was born. BC AD, time split. This man split time. He not only he split it, just by mere presence on earth. It just having there's something different that comes from having the faith of not seeing that. Hey, it's a question I have. I'm not sure why God does things the way he does, but I'm seeing these, as Ryan put, breadcrumbs. I'm seeing these breadcrumbs just where they lead and where they've led me in my life. Now, to what Paul was writing about, God appearing to people. There's one explanation some people might use that I've heard defended. It's called the mass hallucination argument, where 500 people all hallucinated the same thing, that they saw Jesus risen, or even the 12, or even Mary. It was just a hallucinogen. It's tough enough to get two people to hallucinate the same thing, even if they're taking the same drug. And they have to be like pretty close to each other, like relationally.
That seems, yeah, if you think about it, that seems pretty hard to do.
To get 500 people. The thing about science and rationality is the simplest answer is often the truest one, the most probable,
because it seems logical.
It's got to be logical.
It has to be logical.
So with this evidence, what seems more probable? I'm just gonna let that one sit there.
Yeah. Again, these are just breadcrumbs that maybe there is some truth behind this resurrection, and this is like maybe there is some truth around how these people, their lives were utterly changed by seeing Jesus in person, off of the cross, walking the earth, even with all the holes and wounds in his hands. And maybe there's some validity in how ardent, how fervent they were in preaching the gospel wherever they went after that. Whether it's to Rome, aka Europe, whether it's to the Middle East, Asia, Africa.
It's that shift in the disciples, the people closest to him who still chose to run away in his time of need. But then when this resurrection happened, that's the one that does it for me. So back in the 70s, the Watergate scandal happened with President Nixon spying on his opponents, his White House staff and cabinets being embroiled in that. One of them either was or became a Christian. His name's Charles Colson, and he was I think he was called Nixon's hatchet man.
What a name.
I don't ever want to be called that. But he says this: I know the resurrection is a fact, and Watergate proved it to me. How? Because 12 men testified they had seen Jesus raised from the dead. Then they proclaimed that truth for 40 years, never once denying it. Everyone was beaten, tortured, stoned, and put in prison. They would have not endured that if it weren't true. Watergate embroiled 12 of the most powerful men in the world, and they couldn't keep alive for 3 weeks. You're telling me 12 apostles could keep alive for 40 years? Absolutely impossible. This is coming from a guy who was one of those 12 who could not keep alive.
What a statement.
That it's so true when you think about it. The disciples had everything to gain from lying.
Yes.
This, and you can live your life. It's like that's what does it. It's seeing people be so selfless against unimaginable opposition. That's how you know their hope was not in this life. They're like, God's got something better for me. I know it's not going to end in this, with this stoning, with this beating, with this marooned on an island, with this upside down crucifixion, with this lion eating me. It doesn't end there. It doesn't. Their hope was firmly in that.
They truly believed death was defeated, and their faith in Jesus proved it.
Exactly.
Again, if the resurrection wasn't true, Christianity is dead in the water. We have no hope. Death has claim on us forever. Why don't we just do whatever we want to do and live however we want to live?
Wow,
There's no purpose to it. We can't save ourselves. There's no peace. We are going to fail at it. As much as we want to hope that we strive for justice and for peace and for goodness in this world, we always end up somehow oppressing one another. Somehow. and we can't seem to figure it out. Jesus did. The same resurrection power that brought Jesus back from the dead is not just available from a salvation standpoint, but it is proof that anything that is dead in our lives at a personal level, at a relational level, level, and even at a macro world level can be brought back to life. That is what the resurrection ultimately means. Anything that is dead can be brought back to life. Even marriages who have suffered divorce, like one of our pastors, I have yet to learn more about his story. I want to have him on here at some point, but he said that his parents got divorced and over time they remarried. Like that's incredible.
Oh,
Like I can't imagine how many divorces, like how rare that story is.
a remarriage. Wow, that's
Uh-huh.
amazing.
Like how does that happen? I don't know how the whole divorce like went down, but
Mhm.
forgiveness is possible. Reconciliation is possible. Restoration is possible. Now that how often it happens, man, of course that is a hard thing to grasp because you almost think that when those kinds of relationships have that break in trust, there is no going back from it. There is no going back. There's no redemption. There's no second chance. There's no redo. Not with Jesus.
Mhm.
Not with Jesus. Jesus has the power to bring dead things back to life. That's what we believe.
Specialty.
Hmm.
He
He is in
wants
the
it.
business of resurrection.
You don't have to clean up to come to him. He literally wants your mess. He wants your dead things. Bring the plant that you couldn't keep alive. He's the greatest gardener in the world. He
Hmm.
wants, he is asking and inviting us to bring the broken pieces so that he can mend them.
Hmm.
He
We
knows how to fit together. We try to mend them on our own, and it just seems like it doesn't stick or it comes out wonky. It's just not
hmm
how the designer made it.
hmm
So bring it to him. It's all he's asking. And he just wants us to trust him and be in relationship with him.
Truly. I'll end with there's this one Japanese style of pottery called kintsugi. We've talked about it multiple times, but it is where the potter or the artist takes a broken piece of pottery, all the fragments and whatnot, and puts them back together with liquid gold. And when they do that and they remake the vase or the pot with this gold line in between, it becomes more valuable, more beautiful, and is more resilient because of the gold.
Mm-hmm.
That's like Jesus. He knows how the pieces fit together, and when he mends them back together, he makes all of that brokenness valuable. He makes all that brokenness beautiful, even more beautiful than it was before.
Mm-hmm.
And even though it was never the same shape as it originally was, there's this glue that keeps it all together. And it's a beautiful glue. I just believe, I truly believe, we truly believe that Jesus is the one that keeps us together like that and brings beauty out of ashes. We want to encourage you all listening that even the historical facts that we believe in of Jesus existing and rising from the dead, those are crucial things to believe in. We don't believe in them in just pure fact. We believe in them up in here in our minds and here in our hearts. And when we do that, it actually is meant to change us. That changes us. It changes our whole understanding of life, everything about us. There's a hope to live for. There's a reason to live now. There's a reason to keep going now.
Oh,
He did
yes.
that for you, for all of us, as long as we place our faith on him. He's the only glue that has the power to hold us together, all of us together.
Amen.
Amen, indeed. So in our next episode on Theology Talks, we're going to be going into part 2 of who Jesus was from a biblical standpoint and what he taught specifically. And we will dive deeper into his character and his morals and his ethics also. So we hope you guys enjoy this episode. Thank you all for being here and listening to us in our virtual coffee shop.
Can't wait to come back and hash out the next episode. Appreciate you guys, man.
See y'all later. Peace.